Simon & Schuster Audio presents Star Trek: Gateways. What Lay Beyond. Read by David Kay.
Scattered throughout the galaxy are gateways, capable of transporting matter and energy across unfathomable distances. Left behind by a long-vanished civilization, these mysterious portals offer a means of exploration or conquest, many times faster than warp travel. A reactivated gateway has hurled Captain Kirk and his Starship Enterprise nearly 1,000 light-years through space, from an artificial planetoid on which is an old outpost once occupied by the Kalandans, a people thought to be wiped out centuries ago by a viral plague. Kirk and his crew are under Starfleet orders to discover the secret of the ancient interstellar transporter and prevent it from falling into the hands of the enemies of the Federation. Unfortunately, the reactivated gateway has attracted the attention of two mysterious females, Commander Tasm and her officer Luz, who claim to be none other than from the enigmatic Kalandans. When Luz steals a key component of the miraculous technology and uses a gateway to escape, Commander Tasm pursues her. Understanding the threat to the Federation if he loses this component, Kirk now risks all to follow Luz and Tasm and leaps through the gateway. And now, the exciting continuation of the Gateway saga, Star Trek: One Giant Leap by Susan Wright. Captain Kirk was suspended in the gateway, floating between the countless dimensions. The interstellar transport lasted for only a few seconds, but the flashing light seemed to freeze every thought and feeling he had. Then he was falling out the other side, rolling to his feet and unsteady on the soft surface. He was standing on the edge of a small platform, suspended near the top of a giant crevice. The sheer parallel cliffs extended for miles to either side. Backing away from the edge, Kirk looked around and saw the two Kalandans.
Tasm, stop!
Commander Tasm was on the other side of the platform, trying to wrest away the large cylindrical unit from her errant officer, Luz. The blue neutronium cylinder was the key component of the gateway, and they were waving it around between them at the edge of an abyss. Kirk ran forward and jerked the cylinder away from Luz, pulled his phaser from his belt, and trained it on them both. Then he quickly assessed the situation. They were standing on a platform hardly 6 meters square, but what he had mistaken for soft sand was really some kind of plush rubbery material that coated the rock. He took a few steps inside a tunnel that led from the platform into the cliffs, getting a better look at the thick beige stuff. It ran up the sides of the tunnel, covering them completely. Further in, the tunnel ended. When he poked at the stuff, it felt like a dense block of suede. Back outside, Kirk looked in both directions up and down the crevice. He had seen two metal-plated buildings on top of the cliffs before jumping through the gateway. Now, he had to strain to see them. They were much further up on the opposite side. The sun in the orange sky was so bright, it made it hard to focus on the dull metal. He jerked his phaser at Luz. "You brought us here. What is this place?" Luz's lips drew back from her teeth.
"This is our birthing world.
"You aren't Kalandans?"
We're Petra. You're such trusting fools."
Tasm glared at her officer.
"Silence, Luz. You betrayed your pod."
Luz rushed at Tasm.
"I saved the interstellar transporter."
With surprise on her side, Luz managed to shove Tasm toward the edge. Kirk dropped the cylinder to go to Tasm's defense, but he wasn't exactly willing to risk his own life for hers. Aiming his phaser, he hesitated. Before he could fire, he was surrounded by people. Hands grabbed his arms and took away his phaser. He counted 8 humanoids crowded onto the platform, dressed alike in whitish transparent bags, complete with enclosed hands and feet. The loose hoods over their heads slid forward. The humanoid separated Tasm and Luz, and one took the cylinder. Kirk saw the humanoid's face was like melted wax, with his nose, eyes, and chin softened and flattened. Kirk pointed to the cylinder. "I'm James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. I believe that belongs to me." The androgynous Petra held up the cylinder.
"This is for the matriarchs to deal with."
Kirk nodded. "Lead the way." He was more than ready to talk to someone in charge. Commander Tasm had clearly lied to him about everything. Tasm and Luz were herded into the tunnel behind them. It had somehow become unclogged and continued much deeper inside the cliff. There was no obvious light source, but the pliable material covering the wall seemed to glow like amber under a light. It wasn't long before the tunnel ended in a slightly more bulbous section. Straight ahead were 6 hexagonal openings stacked 3 across and 2 high. Each opening was about a meter wide. The Petra holding the cylinder gestured to the first hexagonal opening on the bottom.
In there.
Kirk peered in, but he couldn't see out the other side. "This is the way to the matriarchs?" Without hesitation, the Petra guards seized his legs and arms, and before he knew it, they were tossing him into a hexagonal cell. They slapped something on the end. The seal was hard and peach-colored, almost opaque. He could see the shadows of the Petra outside. Even as he kicked hard against it with both feet, he couldn't budge the seal. After a while, it was pitch dark inside. He was trapped. It was a tiny, claustrophobic place, a sarcophagus buried in the rock. Too bad his phaser was gone, but they hadn't taken his communicator. "This is Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. Can anyone read me? I'm being held prisoner." "This is Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise." A different course of action was required. Kirk strained with both hands to twist the communicator cover out of its hinge. It broke free and left a jagged edge. He dug the broken cover into the seal on the end of the cell. The jagged edge left a small slice in the flexible polymer-like material. It took a while for him to break through, only to find himself trapped again. Kirk carefully retraced his steps and found the tunnel's opening to the platform clogged with a dense mass of tan polymer. But now he knew that somehow the tunnel could be opened. He returned to the 6 hexagonal cells and searched the walls, pushing and poking, trying to find a place where the polymer would open up. Right next to the cells, his hands sank into the wall. He leaned in, pushing his arms into the center. The barrier irised into an opening tall enough for him to step inside another tunnel. Light slanted out of a doorway ahead. Edging closer, he could see a brightly lit, cavernous space filled with various large pieces of equipment. His luck had changed. The chamber held the factory where the Petra made their garments. Inside the door were racks of drying coveralls, shining and smelling strongly like a brand new spacesuit. They were translucent when wet, drying to nearly a solid white. They were designed exactly the same, bags with legs ending in booties and arms ending in 4-fingered gloves. A hood was attached to the neck. Kirk found one his size and pulled it on. With the hood up, no one would notice him in the darkness. Finally, feeling free to roam, Kirk slipped out of the garment factory and began briskly walking down the center of the tunnel. No one paid any attention to him, even when several Petra passed nearby. With their melted faces, he couldn't tell any of them apart. It took hours before he found what he was looking for: a docking bay for spaceships. Finally, he found a small shuttlecraft-type ship that appeared fully operational. He entered it, slid into the pilot's seat, and examined the controls. They were like nothing he had ever seen. Uh-oh, maybe not so simple. I might need a native guide. Not that Luz or Tasm seemed predisposed to help him. Working at a panel, Kirk managed to call up the navigational chart. The pattern of a galactic star map was clear in any language. A red stationary indicator was near the center of the galaxy, in the spiral arm at the base of the Beta Quadrant. Kirk froze. If that red indicator meant what he thought it meant, he was 40,000 light years away from Federation territory. Dazed, he tried to do the math. At top warp speed of 9.9, and no ship could go that fast for very long, it would take him over 20 years to get back to the Enterprise. His only hope was the dimensional transporter. If he could get hold of the cylindrical unit, hook it up to a self-diagnostic subprocessor, then somehow build an archway out of the solid neutronium, even Spock would consider that an impossible task. As he cautiously left the ship, he was in time to see at least a dozen Petra heading toward the door of the hangar. He tagged along behind. When they emerged onto a ledge, he looked up in frank amazement. They were at the bottom of another crevice, much smaller than the chasm outside. The inner wall was lined with hexagonal cells, a honeycomb of thousands of cells stacked at least 100 rows high. The edges of each cell glowed, making a latticework. The lattice was crawling with Petra, climbing up or down, easily gripping the open sides and stepping on the staggered rows, but it was completely, eerily silent. The Petra from the hangar started climbing, so Kirk did too. His gloves and booties were skid-resistant, helping him keep a grip on the edges of the cells. Inside most of the cells were Petra, lying down. They were on their backs, their heads concealed in the darkness at the other end, their encased feet stuck towards him. Kirk climbed very high where more of the cells were empty. Crawling inside, he lay down with his head at the inner end to hide his face in the shadows. He was still trying to think of a way out of this mess when he passed out. Soon he was dreaming about Tasm. She had mere dips for her eyes, with an abbreviated nose and a bump for a chin. She was transformed into a Petra and was being praised by the matriarchs.
Tasm will be rewarded with our highest honor. She will take her place in the birthing chamber and will be fed the royal gel.
Kirk sat straight up, his heart pounding. His hands felt the slight curve on the floor at the end of the cell. It was made to fit his skull. The concave surface felt warm. He guessed it was an information feed that the matriarchs used to distribute their orders and information to the Petra. If this thing provided information, that's exactly what he needed. Kirk lay back down. His mind started to drift. Then he saw that Luz was also fully transformed into a Petra. Apparently, Luz had already given her version of events. Kirk was disappointed. He wanted to know what had possessed her to steal the interstellar transporter from her own commander. He was certain now that Tasm had been surprised and appalled by Luz's betrayal. Apparently, that was the consensus.
Luz is defective and must be put away from the Petra. The defenders will put her into the deep.
Two of the larger Petra took her by each arm, and Kirk couldn't see her anymore. They were going to kill Luz. But if Luz was their enemy, she was his potential ally. Tasm was clearly out of the picture, now that she was a favored member of the ruling clan. Kirk sat up and slid forward to the edge of his cell.
Now, where is the deep?
It had to be the giant fissure outside. They were going to throw Luz off the platform. Kirk rapidly climbed down the cells and hurried back through the tunnels to the cell where he had been sealed in. Feeling his way along the tunnel wall, he went toward the outer barrier and pushed his hands into it. Soon, he was outside again. As the barrier closed, he took up a stance behind it, against one wall. When the barrier opened, Kirk dropped the first Petra with a few well-aimed shots. The second Petra let go of Luz, and soon he was also unconscious on the floor. Kirk grabbed her.
Come on, Luz, run!
She looked at him blankly.
You better snap out of it and start helping me if you don't want to take a dive into nowhere.
She clutched at his arm.
Yes, I think I know where we can go.
She hurried down the tunnel, passing doorways, until she found the one she was looking for. Placing both hands against a far wall, she pushed. The opening was low to the ground. With a wiggling motion, she disappeared inside. Kirk crawled inside after her. Luz, what is this?
access tubes for maintenance and repair. Be quiet, will you? There are other Petra in these tubes.
At least the polymer offered padding for his knees, even if the tube was too small. But it also took extra effort to move, since he sank into the stuff. It was like crawling through sticky clay. She led him through a long series of tubes, heading deeper into the complex. Finally, she turned into a side tunnel that terminated in a dim cul-de-sac.
Nobody uses this tube.
Satisfied, Kirk sat down next to her, straining to see the wall at the end. It looked no different from everything else. He knew he'd have trouble finding his way through the access tubes without Luz, and she was not being cooperative. Kirk had learned that when all else fails, make friends with your enemy. Why did you do it, Luz? Why did you take the gateway? Why did you betray your own people? Surely Tasm was planning on taking the gateway for the Petra. Luz was unable to restrain herself.
Tasm, this is all her fault. She made the wrong decision at every point. I was trying to save the gateway.
Cannily, Kirk agreed. You did bring it back to your people.
That's what I told the matriarchs. Tasm is so inept, she would have lost it. She didn't think of using the gateway to return home. She would have sent it back on an automated drone, making the Petra wait another generation before we had this technology to use.
Kirk nodded sympathetically. So you did help your people. Now they'll find out how the gateway technology works. Where do you think they'll take the cylinder to analyze it? Luz drew away from him slightly.
I'm not telling you anything. I'm a loyal Petra.
Yeah, so loyal they almost killed you. Luz closed her tearing eyes.
That's because Tasm came along and ruined everything. I would be the one accepted into the birthing chamber if she wasn't there. Another Kron, and I would have been gone before you arrived.
Luz put her hands over her face, curling into a ball. Kirk knew it would be useless to try to get more information out of her right now. It was depraved the way these people lied and cheated to get what they wanted, even doing it to their own crewmates. He no longer felt sympathy for any of the Petra. To think this selfish greed was what had brought him so far from his own ship. Kirk turned away from Luz, propping his head in his hand. He almost wished he hadn't rescued her. Time blurred together for Kirk, with no way for him to tell when each day had passed. They snatched sleep in the tiny access tubes, leaving only to go to one of the cell blocks where Luz showed him the feed tubes deep inside. He needed to eat, but it was a strange experience. He had to pull on the straw-like tube until it straightened and dripped a golden liquid. It tasted tartly sweet and was rather thick and syrupy. According to Luz, it supplied the nourishment needs of the Petra in this complex. Whenever they left the narrow access tubes, they saw scores of defenders, the bigger Petra who were searching for him and Luz. At first, Kirk thought he had made a tactical error by rescuing Luz, alerting the Petra that he was on the loose. But Luz knew a great deal about the complex, and that enabled them to avoid the defenders. They were forced to keep moving or be caught. At one point, Kirk was exhausted when Luz said in exasperation,
They're all around us. I can feel it in the tube.
She opened a tube above them and started to climb even faster than before. They emerged into a large room. Luz knelt over something. Another tube was opening up, but it wasn't a tube like he expected. It was almost as large as the chamber they were in. About 4 meters down was a deep golden color that lacked the inner glow of the surrounding walls. Luz pointed to the opening.
Get in and hold on to the edge. We'll hang from here until the defenders pass through.
What is this?
A nutrient sac, holding the nourishment for distribution to the cells.
Kirk swallowed. How could he miss that smell of the sweet syrup they drank every day? He quickly slid inside as the opening began slowly squeezing shut. The smell was overpowering. He didn't want to imagine what would happen if he fell into it, stuck swimming until he couldn't stay afloat any longer, then finally sinking under. After the defenders were gone, they climbed out. As they continued to elude the searchers, Kirk tried various tactics to make Luz cooperate with him. He was desperate enough to single-handedly hijack a starship, but he wasn't leaving without the gateway component. Luz refused to tell him anything that would help him locate it. Every time they had to go into a block of cells to get some nourishment, Kirk placed his head in an information feed, trying to hear news about the gateway, but he didn't discover anything useful. Yet the countless days of constant companionship had an impact on Luz, because both of them were forced to struggle together to survive. They were sitting in yet another narrow access tube, with Kirk trying to ignore the closeness of the walls, when Luz began muttering about Tasm for the 100th time.
Just because Tasm was the leader, they rewarded her and tossed me away, even though I was right. Now, Tasm will breed a bunch more idiotic Petra to bumble around out there.
Kirk tried to flatter her. You're obviously not meant to be with these people, Luz. Why don't you leave here? Surely there are other Petra who would appreciate your talents. Luz frowned thoughtfully.
I thought about that. Petra territory is far-flung. There are birthing worlds far removed from here. But even if I was allowed to stay on one, I'd be relegated to cleaning waste tubes for the rest of my life. Only those born in the complex are accepted into the birthing chamber.
Kirk tried to seem casual about her sudden interest. Didn't Tasm earn that honor by giving the matriarchs the gateway? Valuable technology like the interstellar transporter is worth something.
That's true. I could take it to one of the more distant Petra worlds, and once I was made a matriarch, it would be too late to change it.
I'll make a deal with you, Luz. I want out of this place. I can't stand it anymore. He gave a realistic shudder, hoping she would think his human sensibilities were overwhelmed by the alien culture. I'll help you get the cylinder for the gateway if you get me out of here. Once we're off this planet, we're both free to go our separate ways. Luz hesitated.
I don't believe you. But I think you're right that taking the gateway is the only way I'll learn my proper place among the Petra. I know where it may be.
Kirk contained his anticipation as he followed her through the tubes, heading down toward the side of the complex adjacent to the cliffs. They descended lower than Kirk had ever been. He commented to Luz, "This tube is different." Luz nodded.
It's one of the access tubes for the conduits supplying the experimental stations. Far down under the cliffs is where we work with technology we don't understand. It's safer. The cliff has been rigged with charges so that in an emergency, each experimental station can be dropped into the Great Chasm. There's molten rock at the bottom.
Soon, the search for the experimental gateway station began. After a while, as she leaned forward to look through yet another opening, Luz told Kirk to look inside.
There's the magnetomotive. It's fully operational.
Enormous black rings were stacked on top of one another, separated by suspension units on scaffolding like towers. Luz explained that the series of magnetic circuits were used to focus the electromagnetic field of the planet. Kirk guessed it might be enough to power the dimensional transporter. You think they're trying to activate the gateway? Luz nodded.
Naturally.
But there's no archway, no computer. The bulk of the room lay beyond the dull black tower of magnets. Determined to discover the truth, Kirk pushed open the tube so he could see better. The floor between the magnets and the inner wall was smooth rock, but the door was down to their left, and he would be in full view of anyone entering or leaving. Luz, will that conduit hold my weight? She also looked down, then at the wide conduit next to them. In answer, she swung her leg over the conduit, using her hands to balance on the shaft. Kirk kept an eye on the doorway, hoping no one would come in at that moment. Hitching herself forward, Luz crossed over the gap so she could step onto the scaffolding. Kirk swiftly followed. This close to the magnetic flux, Kirk could feel his hair rising on his body. It sounded as if the circuits were powering up. Their scaffolding tower was connected to the other towers on either side by narrow catwalks. Kirk stepped onto one of the catwalks. He went in the opposite direction from the door so he wouldn't be seen. It took 3 nerve-wracking trips across the catwalks to reach a scaffolding tower that was 1/4 of the way around the magnets. Then, Kirk saw a Petra defender standing against the far corner. Kirk pointed down, gesturing to Luz to keep quiet. She stayed at the back of the scaffolding, gazing fearfully at the hooded head of the defender. He went forward to the front end of the scaffolding. The arch was standing in the center of a ring of lights. It was an identical replica to the one they found on the Calandon station. He knew he shouldn't be surprised at anything the Petra were capable of. Though they looked like simple underground dwellers, their technological capability exceeded almost every other culture he'd encountered. That arch changed everything. Kirk couldn't begin to imagine the terrible things the Petra would be capable of with an operational interstellar transporter. These people were ruthless and would use this technology to their own advantage. It was his fault the gateway had fallen into their hands. He was determined to change that. Staying very still to keep from attracting the attention of the guard, he searched for the cylindrical unit. It wasn't attached to the new arch. Instead, there was a bunch of cables that snaked along the floor toward the magnetomotive. Luz joined him, keeping a wary eye on the guard. A voice came from below. It was Tasm.
Is the flux stabilized yet?
Another Petra somewhere down below answered her.
The MMF has reached optimum level.
Tasm gave the order.
Proceed with the test run.
A different Petra stepped up to face the gateway. Inside the gateway, an image had formed of wind-blown sand, nearly burying two metallic structures. Kirk recognized the surface of the planet. The Petra eagerly stepped forward. Nothing came out the other side. The Petra was gone. Tasm was staring down at a handheld communicator.
He made it. He's next to the shield generators. The gateway is functional. I'll inform the matriarchs at once. Keep the magnetomotive on full standby. Next, we'll try a long-range test.
Kirk knew the gateway offered him the chance to cross those troublesome 40,000 light-years in an instant, but he couldn't allow the Petra to keep the gateway. Next to him, Luz seemed goaded to dreams of glory.
How are we going to get everyone out of here?
Kirk reached into the top of his boot to retrieve his broken communicator. We'll have to create a diversion. The cerium krellide power cell was too small to cause much damage if he made it overload. But there must be something he could do in a neighboring chamber that would draw Tasm out. It would have to last long enough for the gateway to read his mind and cut through the light years between him and home. Luz tried to snatch the communicator from his hand.
What are you doing?
Kirk managed to hang on to it, but the broken cover flew off, falling 60 meters. The movement caught the defender's attention. He instantly alerted the other Petra in the room. It didn't take long for the defender to light up the entire tower and detect them both. Kirk slowly climbed down to the floor. Luz was dragged from the scaffolding as well, and in the shrieking melee she caused trying to break free, Kirk made a dash for the arch. But Tasm stepped between him and the archway, stopping him short by pointing his own phaser at him.
Don't move, Kirk, or I'll put you away for good.
He nodded toward the distinctive blue cylinder that he now saw was mounted on a large computer unit. It was sitting next to the magnetomotive. The gateway doesn't belong to you.
Now it does. I earned it.
With each of his arms held by a big Petra defender, Kirk was marched out of the experimental station. He cast one longing look back at the gateway. So close. He'd almost made it home. Tasm took the lead as Kirk, then Luz were half carried, half dragged up a long slanting corridor. As they went up, Kirk wondered if they were being taken to the exterior platform, where they would be summarily tossed off the cliff to disappear into the molten rock at the bottom. At least the heat would burn him to a cinder before he hit the lava. But after going up a few levels, they began to move deeper into the complex. Kirk kept track of every turn they took, optimistically intending to use the knowledge to find his way back to the gateway. They finally reached their destination, and Tasm glared at him.
One wrong move, and I'll shoot you.
Luz was infuriated.
I saved the gateway. I brought it back.
Tasm actually smiled.
Perhaps the matriarchs will thank you before putting you away, Luz.
Tasm didn't touch the wall, but an opening began to grow. The Petra herded them inside. They were at the bottom of a cylindrical well that rose very high into the rock. In the very center, a long, slender tube dangled down to a bulbous gold sac that nearly brushed the floor. It was shaped like a ripe pear, its rounded sides shiny and taut. The surrounding walls of the well were dotted by hundreds of small protrusions that were moving. Each was the head, arms, and chest of a Petra. Kirk turned to Tasm. "What is this?"
This is the birthing chamber.
Then she looked up to the beings above her.
Beloved matriarchs, we have brought you Luz and the Invader.
Kirk didn't think it was a good idea to be considered a nameless antagonist.
Matriarchs, I'm James T. Kirk, and I come in peace.
One of the Petra defenders belted him in the stomach, and Kirk dropped to his knees with Luz. Tasm continued.
Matriarchs, we found Luz and the intruder near the gateway while we were testing it.
Rather than be condemned without a hearing, Kirk lifted his hand to appeal to them.
Matriarchs, it was an accident that brought me to your world. I'm no invader. Surely we can come to an understanding.
The Invader must be put away. Luz is defective. Luz must be put away immediately. Tasm is exemplary. Tasm will soon join us.
Tasm stepped closer to the sack that hung in the center of the birthing chamber, raising her empty hand toward it. Her body trembled in eagerness.
The royal gel is almost ready.
That's when Kirk understood. The polymer substructure of the Petra complex was the living body of the matriarchs. It was one vast organism that was growing in the tunnel-riddled cliffs. This well was their brain center. The matriarchs supported their children in their own body, using their own life systems to distribute nourishment and remove the waste. One thing was clear. There was no reasoning with these Petra. Kirk made his decision and acted instantly. Tasm was so absorbed in gazing at the sack of royal gel that he knocked against her and twisted the phaser from her hand. The defenders leaped at him, but he bounded up the slight rise and jumped onto the hanging sack. Tasm screamed at him.
Don't! You can't touch the gel!
Oh no?
Kirk stamped on the bag. Tasm shrieked as the defenders gathered around the base of the sack. Luz backed toward the door, seeing a chance to escape. Kirk aimed his phaser down at the sack and fired as he jumped. The sack exploded in a boiling gush of sticky liquid. Tasm and the defenders were covered. Kirk's feet slipped in the ankle-deep stuff as he landed, but he was instantly up and heading for the door. Tasm was flopping around on her side. The baggy coveralls over her began to swell. The defenders were gasping in agony, writhing on the floor. Apparently, only females reacted well to the royal gel. He reached Luz in time to pull her away from the edge of the splattered gel. She was shaking with desire to dive in.
Make your choice, Luz. I don't have time to fight you.
Her straining toward the gel eased, and her eyes focused on him.
They would kill me before they let me join the birthing chamber. Let us go.
Kirk and Luz set off down the corridor at a flat run. Kirk stunned several Petra on the long corridor to the experimental stations, but there were no defenders posted at the door to the gateway room. They'd been too eager to accompany them to the matriarchs. Inside, the magnetomotive was running at full standby. Luz went to the cylinder and grabbed hold of it, trying to wrench it from the metal computer unit.
No, Luz. This gateway is our only way out.
Luz shook her head.
But I need it. No other birthing world will take me without it.
There's no time, Luz. It's either die here or come with me now.
She hesitated. Then she looked at the phaser in his hand. She went over to the controls of the magnetomotive and adjusted the dials.
There. It's ready to go.
Kirk went to the gateway. The image of the terrace overlooking Starfleet Academy was bright in his mind's eye, but his hands were busy with the phaser. He clicked it to level 10, then set the energy feed wide open. Kirk took a deep breath and concentrated on the terrace at Starfleet Academy. Voices were coming from the tunnel outside as the flagstones appeared.
the cloud-filled sky loomed over the craggy hills of San Francisco. It was just as Kirk remembered. Without another thought, he pushed Luz through the gateway. She stumbled over the threshold and fell onto the flagstones. As several Petra burst into the room, Kirk jumped through the gateway and flung the overloading phaser sideways. He looked back as the Petra running towards him were caught in the explosion of the phaser, and the giant magnets crashed to the ground. The last thing he saw, the walls of the chamber shuddered and began to fall into the chasm and the molten rock below. He had buried the gateway in the fiery heart of the planet. Now, he and Luz were on the terrace overlooking Starfleet Academy, 40,000 light years from the destruction of the gateway. Kirk couldn't stop grinning. Welcome to Earth, Luz. Commodore Enright and the other Starfleet officials eventually let Luz go after she and Kirk were fully debriefed. Luz didn't know much more than Kirk had already figured out during his visit to the Petra birthing world. Luz claimed that it was against Petra laws when TASM had made them pose as Kalandans to steal the gateway. Kirk didn't believe a word of her testimony, knowing that Luz would say whatever it took to get her way. But Starfleet was satisfied. On the last day, when the Enterprise was finally due to enter orbit, Kirk went to say goodbye to Luz at the orbital space station. Luz, do you plan to try to return to the Petra? She grimaced.
No, the Petra would never accept me. I'm heading out on my own now.
Kirk was sure she'd be fine. After all, she had almost succeeded in getting everything she wanted.
There's a lot to admire in your people, Luz, but I don't see how their totalitarian regime could satisfy your needs.
She looked at him oddly.
You never did understand the Petra, did you? Our unity is what makes us magnificent.
Luz gazed out the observation window, looking toward the core of the galaxy.
The Petra are strong, and they're coming. I know it. We haven't seen the last of my people yet.
Rather than allow the gateway technology to be used by enemies of the Federation, after Kirk's safe return, Spock and the Enterprise have destroyed the gateway found on the planetoid with the abandoned Kalandan outpost. Yet only a few years later, in a remote sector of the Alpha Quadrant, Commander Nick Keller of the USS Challenger has discovered a gigantic gateway that has been powered open, and through it has come a mysterious ship full of statues. But the statues are more than they seem. 20 years ago, a caravan of alien vessels disappeared through this gateway. But on the other side, 11,000 years have passed. Now the descendants of those aliens, stranded for millennia on a hostile planet, have managed to open the gateway in hope of returning. But the aliens have lived away from our universe for so long that they find themselves completely unprepared for their homecoming. Keller takes upon himself the dangerous task of piloting an alien ship through the gateway to deliver the message that it is safe to leave. But in a bizarre twist of fate, once he's on the alien's strange metallic world, he does not find it an easy task to convince them that they must soon depart before the gateway once again closes. And now, the thrilling continuation of the Gateway saga, Star Trek Challenger, Exodus, by Diane Carey. The free dancer was dying. Its enormous lung-like body inflated one final time, but not enough. Slowly, the giant descended from the biohaze in a shroud of parasitic life forms. The parasites puffed outward from the free dancer and raced upward to the stormy atmosphere. It sharply dropped the last 50 feet to the ground. Shutters closed all over the city, just in time. At first contact with the planet, the creature heaved, then flattened to the trail's surface, and there gushed out its life. Electric blue neon crackles engulfed the corpse in a violent cocoon. Nick Keller found himself reminded of old newsreels. The crash of the dirigible Hindenburg, a giant lung collapsing into a single great mercurial transfer of energy, as all the animal's stored power shot directly into the planet. The woman behind him touched his shoulder with concern. "Close the shutter. You'll be burned by the blast wave." "I need to see it." Raw energies strobed between the huts. The uncontrolled natural death of a free dancer could take 100 people with it in a population complex, or go without witness on some distant open tundra. The whole planet was a tundra. A metal tundra. Soot on silver, on pearl, on ingot, with leaden shadows and pewter hills. The only natural life was in the skies, and it came down only to die. This animal had grounded on the outskirts of the city of the living, the oldest settlement on the planet, a cluster of knobby buildings and dome huts, secured with pylons rooted 20 feet into the planet's mantle. Out there were 6 or 7 scattered huts. The free dancer flattened right on top of one of the huts. The energy transferred back into the planet, and an instant later, the blast wave blew through the city. Keller let the shutter drop just in time and ducked. He grabbed his tricorder and turned to the woman.
Braxton, come on. It landed on a hut.
He didn't wait. Braxton would follow him. She always did. Heat from the dead free dancer radiated through the metallic streets and buildings. Though he felt the heat, he was protected by the chainmail sheath over his own clothes and his tightly woven chainmail footwear. The free dancer's dropping on a house with its shutters open caused an implosive charge. Curiosity had gotten the better of somebody. The people inside had made a bad bet. A free dancer could die a half-mile away, then in its final convulsion, flip over and land right on some poor slob. Keller shook his head. Could have been me. Next time, maybe I'll close the shutter. The carcass was now a huge pile of placemat-sized ashes. Keller plowed right into the mess, to the imploded dome hut. As he pushed through a gathering crowd, Keller cast a glance behind for Braxton. She was there, right behind him. Her narrow shoulders shifted back and forth under the shimmering foil tunic she wore. She had no idea what it would be like on the other side of the gateway. Here, everything was silver, ferrous, bullion, and plate. The planet was one big ingot, hammered, pocked, or polished by constant storms. Keller's tricorder offered only basic statistics and couldn't read beneath the planet's surface. Braxton stayed with him until he began climbing the dome's ash-entombed ruins. He handed her his tricorder just before climbing out of arm's reach. "Keller, when will you understand? They've been anointed." He glanced around for someone who might help and spotted 2 of their neighbors, a pair of brothers.
Donistel, Saren, climb up here. Help me pry this thing open.
The 2 teenage boys looked around at the others, scouting for disapprovals. Excitement got the better of them. They broke with traditions and swam through the ashes toward Keller. The shutter wasn't latched, but only bent by the force of the free dancer's frying pan act.
Ready? 3, 2, haul!
Though his hands weren't strong enough, his foot behind the shutter and the 2 boys pulling on the sides did the trick. Keller dropped into the hole that had been the window. Using the tricorder, he found 3 people nearby, one unconscious, one moaning, one dead. The 3 victims were hesitantly taken away, 2 to be tended, 1 to be anointed. Braxton came over to him. "By saving them, you've gone against random order. If you stay here, you must learn to accept these decisions." "These aren't decisions, Braxton, and I'm not staying here, and neither are you." Overhead, lightning and long neon storm clouds skated the biohaze. Braxton announced to the crowd,
Get your grid mats. Spread the word for all hunters to meet at the feast plain.
The crowd broke up and hurried back into the city to prepare for the hunt. Braxton was uneasy giving the order to hunt. or any order. It wasn't in her nature. She'd lost all her relatives in the last few hunts. She had no children and was alone, except for the injured traveler she had nursed back to health. This would be the 5th hunt since Keller came through the gateway and crashed the spinner out on the plain. Through weeks of Keller's recovery, Braxton had provided both nursing and information. She had wanted to go through the gateway more than either of the other 2 elders, Rietta or Lunty, and for that reason she had stayed while they had gone to the gateway. One of those old order quirks of caution, she reminded Keller. When you appeared in one of our spinners, we didn't know what kind of being you were or why you came. You told us we must use our stored energy to power more ships, to cross over before the gateway closes, that it is still time to go. Still, there are many fears to this. He looked deeply into her eyes, hoping she'd find the truth in his. Braxton, this side doesn't want people. It never did. On the big scale of time, 11,000 years isn't that long. The time of the living is running out on this big ball bearing. On the other side of the gateway, you can do more than just survive. You can grow. You won't have to give up thousands of people to the hunts. It's better there. It wants life. She nodded. I believe you. We'll keep storing energy and keep trying to convince Camillus. If her voice is with us, then we'll all go. He smiled at her. Braxton was special because she had survived more hunts than all but 2 others of her people. That made her the 3rd elder, the one Rietta and Lunty had left behind. After so long with no word from Rietta and Lunty, the living had accepted 2 new elders. Braxton was now in a new triumvirate of leaders for the living. There was Braxton, a one-eyed woman named Camillus, and a man named Issel, in that order of seniority. Braxton wanted to go through the gateway. Issel intended to go through, but didn't think this was the time. Since there was trouble in space on the other side, perhaps another 10,000 years of preparation was needed. The middle elder, the one-eyed Cyclops named Camillus, hadn't made up her mind about what Random Order wanted. 3 elders, a leadership in turmoil, one for Keller's way, one against, and one vacillating. Camillus knew hers was the swing vote, but also didn't know whether to trust Keller, a stranger who had soared through the gateway after the signal from the Anointed was silenced. Was Keller the one who had stopped the signal? What had happened to the Anointed? These many troubled months hadn't been smooth skating for Keller or his message of welcome from the other side. Keller told Braxton the time was running out. If my multiplication's right, it's been almost 30 hours on the other side. They can't hold the gateway open much longer. Keller, I think you'll prevail. Random Order sent you to us to tell us it's time to leave. Why would you be here otherwise? She pulled away, her shiny eyes bright. It's time for the hunt. I have to be there. He sighed. I know, you, me, couple of 100 other hunters, and my trusty tricorder. She smiled. Again, you'll take it onto the plane? I have to reset it just before the capture. You know that. You reset at the last hunt, and the one before, and before that. He palmed the instrument. Oh, I suppose. Clears the head. Electrical interference is my hobby now. I can compare certain electrical readings. Stand right in front of me. Let me use you for a sensor anchor. Braxton pressed her hands to her gold-leaf pixie-cut hair. Her hair looked brassy to him here. What would it look like on the other side? He had no way to guess. All he knew was that her smile was friendly, her heart forgiving. She smiled. Keller, I'd like to see trees. Through the gateway, Braxton, there's Belterre. We have trees on Belterre. We're sowing sod, too. Grass. I think you'll take to grass between your little stubby toes down there. She smiled, but he'd awakened a cautious streak. Does color hurt? Braxton, color is one of the best things.
Hunt! The hunt!
Hunt! The hunt!
Hunt! The hunt!
Local heralds were running through the streets, summoning all those qualified to hunt. Keller sighed. What a shame. A free dancer had just landed here, but all its energy was lost. Hundreds of people would soon die a horrific electrical death to tamp down more free dancers in a controlled environment so one could be killed and its energy taken into storage. The Hunt plane was nothing more than miles of Ferris flats, brushed to a dull sheen by storms. The biohaze, a shroud of primordial life surviving in the atmosphere, flickered and swam and tumbled. There were 20,000 people or so on this planet, by Keller's best reckoning. The low number was a sad clue. According to the old records, there'd once been upwards of 100,000, all descendants of the crews and passengers of those first ships to pass through the gateway. Nature was intolerant here. The planet couldn't support a population. The living were more devolving than evolving. They survived, but didn't thrive. Starvation, competition, failure. The metal planet would never let them flourish. So they clung to a legend about going home. They wanted to go. They planned to go, unless they were chosen in the hunt of a free dancer or anointed, killed by accident or illness, and preserved to act as a high-energy storage unit. They worked toward the goal of eventually leaving. The plan's most recent leg had been a monumental one, to take thousands of anointed through the gateway, then send a signal for the rest of the people to follow. That signal had never come. Instead, quite another signal had been sent. The anointed had been summoned down from their pedestals all at once, not by destiny, but by Nick Keller in his determination to keep the gateway open. Taking the unexpected destruction of the anointed as a message, the living had hunkered down once more to the business of collecting energy from the free dancers, but this time with the idea of another 10,000 years of work before trying again. They'd used up almost all their stored energy to open the gateway and hold it open, then power the small spinner fleet they'd launched. They had to hustle now, hunt more and more often, to gather enough energy to go on surviving. But Keller had come. He wanted them to use their new power stores in a different way, to go through the gateway en masse as they had originally planned. He was the only one who knew the clock was ticking to a much nearer alarm. Challenger and the ship carrying the anointed could only hold the gateway open a few hours on their side, more than a year on this side. A year. Sounded long, but wasn't. The living had been waiting years on this side for the elders, Ryuta and Lunti, to send a summons, that instead received a cutoff. They supposed the anointed had met with tragedy in space. After hundreds of generations, nothing had come of this. They had accepted 2 new elders, along with the one left behind, and they'd begun again. But Keller clung to his belief that the gateway was still open. He clamped his lips on his thoughts as he and Braxton worked side by side, along with hundreds of hunters from all the settlements, to fit woven gum segments into place and seal the seams. The mats protected the free dancers from the planet, but didn't protect the living from the free dancers. The living had learned long ago that they had to let the free dancers, well, there was no nice way to say it, let them feed. Rather quickly, the mats were pieced together into a gigantic circle of a size perfect for its task, big enough that the free dancers would be able to sense the living crowded upon it, but not so big that the living couldn't race for the edges when the time was right. Hundreds of healthy, innocent men and women would strip down to their birthday suits and plunge out onto the plain, then wait for the free dancer herd to see them, whatever that meant, and come to the trough. Against all instinct, the living had learned to simply stand there and be chosen in an electrical feeding frenzy that defied description. The people would stand with their faces up, fear clearly shown as the monsters came down, and wait for the elders to decide the free dancers had eaten enough that they would return the next time. Finally, the scramble back to the perimeter while the slaughter went on. Desperate hunters would pull on their silky chainmail tunics so they would be protected from the pyrotechnics, snatch up their arc spikes, pulpers, clamps, nets, and race back to harvest one free dancer for the reservoir of energy and the gizzard full of candle flies it provided. Courageous people would be dying soon, and horribly. But not him, and not Braxton. He needed to live, and he needed her to live. One of the hunters pointed at the sky. "Look, a spinner!" Keller raised his hand to shield his face from the ice particles and scanned the ugly sky. Beside him, Braxton hunched her shoulders and turned her unprotected face upward. It was a bug-shaped metallic vessel with forward mandibles and a bulbous stern. A spinner from the fleet on the other side of the gateway, and quite literally, the last thing Keller expected to see. Keller recognized the man who stepped from the spinner as the elder named Lunty. Braxton put her hand on Keller's arm. "This will put to rest the idea that you may not have been honest with us. There were rumors that Ryuta and Lunty had died on the other side." Keller pushed his way through the crowd of hunters to face Lunty. Lunty spoke angrily to Keller.
You don't belong here. We don't belong outside. We should never have gone.
Keller held himself in check and went for information. "What's the status on the other side?"
They think you're dead. Almost all the anointed are gone. Time is running out.
"Lunty, we've been getting ready. We've been storing energy to power the transport ships. All the living will be able to go through the gateway." Braxton appeared beside Keller and spoke softly to him. "The plan is troubled now. Lunty's returned to us, and he is an elder. There can only be 3 elders. Lunty's voice will now be heard with my voice and the voice of Camillus." Lunty spoke up again.
We will not go through. We will destroy all the transporting vessels and will live here as we are meant.
Keller couldn't believe his ears. "Meant? Nobody's meant to live on this pie plate. There's no natural life here at all." He turned to the crowd and implored them. "The gateway's still open. That's a clear message. My friends in Ryuta are holding it open. They're still waiting for us." Lunty held up his hand and pointed to the skies.
The gateway remains open because Keller's friends are forcing Ryuta to push Anointed after Anointed into the processor. Waste it. Take the spinner, Keller. Go away and leave us alone.
"That's exactly what you'll be, Lunty. Alone." The crowd was nervous, doubtful, and suddenly scared. Lunty continued.
If we go to space and the gateway closes before we go through, then we all die. All our energy will be used up. We'll freeze and starve by thousands. We have a fresh store of energy to be used in powerful vessels to go through the gateway to that place of horrors, or to be used to make life better here. More heat, more building, new ways to hunt."
Braxton interrupted. "Keller, there are 3 elders. Since Lunty is back, he claims his place. If Camillus decides to stay or go, we do that." Lunty spoke boldly to the gathering of hunters.
The elders speak with separate voices. Random order will declare which voice shall be final. There must be a hunt decision. When the first free dancer descends, all hunters will retreat except for the 2 challengers. One will be chosen. The other, the voice left behind, is meant to be heard.
Since all the hunters were gathered anyway, and there were free dancers in the sky, the hunt decision would happen here and now. The judge would be Cyclops, Camillus, the impartial elder. Impartial, vacillating, really. Camillus was also dangerously superstitious. She was waiting for a sign that this was the right time to abandon their ridiculous planet. Keller turned to Camillus. "What if both die? If both are chosen?" Camillus stepped forward.
Then neither is meant to be heard. There will be 2 new elders.
"Wait, what do you mean by 2 new elders? If I'm chosen, Braxton still will be..." Camillus shook her head.
You will not be on the hunt plane. Braxton is the dissenting elder. A hunt decision is made with elders.
Keller appealed to Camillus. "There's got to be something better." Camillus's remaining eye shifted back and forth, as if scanning the old records and laws and rules and their details.
Braxton can select a surrogate.
Braxton gazed at him with miserable adoration. "If you are chosen, Keller, there will be no one strong to speak for going. I will stand on the plane." A devious light came on in Lunty's eyes.
Very well, Keller. You'll be on the hunt plane as my surrogate. Braxton will represent the voice to go. You will represent me and the voice to stay. Random order will decide which voice remains to be heard, as it has for 500 generations.
Keller fought his own inner arguments and tried to add up the situation. If Braxton lived, her voice remained, and the ideal of going through the gateway would prevail. But Lunty could easily muddy the waters, play on Camillus's doubts, and make the clock run out. He could stall enough to let the last anointed go into the processor and the gateway to finally close, locking the living to their fate on this side. Braxton wasn't the type to fight him hard enough. In fact, Lunty had Keller better than even Lunty realized. Keller had only his one ace, his big secret. He could arrange for one or the other to survive on the feast grid. He could do it artificially. Now what? Admit to these brave hunters that he'd been hedging his bets, immunizing himself and Braxton with tricorder scans? Tell them how different the energy acted on either side of the gateway? Giant shadows moved across the grid mats. Right, Lunty. But all I have to do is throw myself before the free dancer and Braxton's voice remains. And I swear to do that, Lunty. I won't let your voice be heard. Around him, Lunty, Braxton, and Camillus, a sea of hunters rounded their shoulders against the bitter wind, their soft link shirts ablaze with reflected lights from overhead. So, the free dancers would decide, except that the tricorder would have more influence. He'd already scanned and immunized Braxton from being selected by the free dancers, yet Keller hadn't immunized himself. And now he wouldn't. Braxton had to live.
We have descent! Descending! Descending!
Overhead, the first free dancer released its heat and floated down toward the grid to take its meal. Keller moved away from Braxton. When the free dancer came for him, he didn't want to be anywhere near her. He closed his eyes and stripped the tricorder strap off his shoulder. Suddenly, he was pushed forward and stumbled to one knee. His tricorder flew from his hand. Over him, Lunty was aiming the tricorder directly at him. Keller knew he would never be chosen. He would give the free dancers a burning mouth. Lunty, how could you possibly know?
I have lived here a lifetime. Energy is our tonic. Now I've been to the outside and I know all things behave in strange dances.
Lunty dumped the tricorder on the mats and raced away from the center of the feast grid. He didn't realize Braxton was already immunized. But now Keller was immunized too. If the free dancer chose neither of them, time would run out before another decision could be hammered into place. Lunty would still be able to keep his people here. The free dancers were getting closer. Keller called out to Camillus.
Wait. This decision's too important. Lunty must stand on the plane with Braxton and me. All three of us must take our chances.
Lunty glared at Keller.
Why should this be? Order has already been established.
If your voice remains, Lunty, there won't be any doubts. Braxton will do what you want. I will too. That's my promise to the living. Lunty turned to Camillus.
I reject this. He uses our rules against us.
Keller pointed out to Camillus. Lunty's afraid of true random order. Camillus fixed her single eye on Lunty.
If you're afraid, Lunty, then I side with Braxton, and we will go tomorrow.
Rain began to pummel the confused crowd. The hunters were nervous, glancing up. Pellets of ice were melting in the heat of the first few free dancers as they came down directly over the hunt plane. Long strands of electrical floss, snapping like a woman's hair in the wind. All the hunters were on the plane, with Keller, Braxton, and Lunty at dead center. They left their non-conducting mail shirts behind, and thus would be unprotected from the savage tendrils of floss. Camillus turned to the hunters.
Clear the plane!
Clear the plane! Clear the plane!
Her shout was carried dutifully through the throng, and the hunters raced for the perimeter to pull their mail shirts back on, there to stand and watch as a great decision occurred on the grid. For a woman who had trouble making a decision, she was done with this one. With Lunty still standing on the plane, Braxton didn't understand the change and called to Keller.
What happened?
Keller called back to her.
Stay there. It's the three of us now. Just stay put.
Lunty had no choice but to stand his own ground as the first free dancer came down and the hunters flooded off the grid. As far as anyone else knew, this was a fair fight. Only Keller and Lunty knew otherwise. The shock floss moved toward Braxton, a maneuver which Keller had to battle in his own heart. He wanted to run and protect her, but he'd already done all he could with his tricorder. Lunty never bothered to look at Braxton. Of course, he must assume Keller would already have immunized her. The tendrils snapped around Braxton, but quickly retracted at the taste of her. Lunty knew, for sure now, that he was the only vulnerable person here.
I thought you were not so brutal, Keller. You know who is chosen now.
Just between the two of them, Keller offered a nod of understanding. Yes, but it's your life against all these others. One person's life, one selfish person, against a whole community of lost souls.
Then you sentence me, Keller?
One more death in this place? I'm sorry for it. The free dancer came down. Lunty squinted and raised his arms to shield his face, but he was doomed. Floss snapped and sizzled around them. Keller knew his only duty was to move away from Lunty and let fate take its course. He had to take these people home. Lunty closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and prepared to lose. But he never ran, never even attempted to protect himself or change what had been choreographed, either by random order or by Keller's manipulation. Keller ducked the tendrils and watched Lunty a couple more seconds before he finally snapped.
Braxton, get off the grid! Run!
He shouted to the crowd.
Arc spike!
Someone seized the nearest spike and heaved it. The 15-foot spear flew poorly, but enough to sail over Lunty's head toward Keller. Keller bunched up his body and propelled himself into the air. With his high hand, he knocked the spike out of its path. It cartwheeled once and thumped to the mats 10 feet from him. He rolled until his hands made contact with the spike. The long device leaped into his grip. He rolled again, turned the spear end upward, and gave a mighty shove. He kept a grip on the end of the spike and plunged at Lunty. Once on top of him, Keller dug his fingers into a seam between the gum mats until his fingernails scraped metal. The planet's surface. With all the strength in his lean and muscled arm, he hauled back on the woven gum. With the other hand, he grounded the arc spike's blunt end into the now bared spot of surface metal and rolled for his life. The gum mats coiled around him and Lunty. Keller kept rolling until the mats were tied around them both in a rubber coffin. The free dancer was grounded. Lunty's body jolted against him. They were frying. Indescribable heat soon filled up his brain and broiled away his thoughts. Time lost meaning. He was aware only of a terrible hammering from outside, as if the rubber roll was instead the head of a mallet. The planet surged up under the great electrical bladder and sucked back what had once given in some weird ancient trade. When the last crackle sounded, Nick Keller had stopped trying to handle the moment and simply allowed himself to be slaughtered. All the more surprised when he found himself alive. Keller forced himself and Lunty to roll free from the coiled mats. Around them and rising several stories on one side was the cooked mess that had once been the free dancer that nearly killed them, now a mountain of blackened flakes. Lunty was choking.
Why would you save me?
Possessed with sudden ferocity, Keller grinned and snarled at the same time. Because I don't have to accept the verdict of random order. Those aren't gods in the sky, they're animals. The free dancer chose you to die, but I choose for you to live. Lunty stared up at him. Behind the frothing hiss of the barbecued free dancer, they heard the cheer and rave of the hunters, who were just now coming to understand what had just happened. Braxton came behind him, her narrow face crumpled with fear. Next was Camillus and her family, and 2 by 2, 3 by 3, the rest of the hunters pushed through the mountain of ash and fibrous, smoldering flesh until there were hundreds crowded on the melted segment. Shaking with aftershock and satisfaction, Keller managed to stand up and glared down at Lunty.
Random order is finished here. I'm in charge now. We don't belong here and we're not staying. Finally, blessedly, we're gonna saddle up and leave this moodless world.
On the other side of the gateway, from the science deck of the Starship Challenger, Savannah Ring maintained constant contact with Ryota on the grave ship, monitoring the energy output to the gateway.
We're down to the last chamber of zombies. Any one of those corpses could nourish a power system on our side for months. But to keep that gateway open, we're pouring them in like penny candy.
The Challenger bridge crew were silent and close to despair. Suddenly, the navigator popped to renewed life.
Sir, I'm reading metallic objects. Could it be ships?
No one else spoke as they watched the gateway's inside smolder, brighten like a spotlight behind smoke, and ultimately spew a single bulb-shaped ship made entirely of brass. The new ship was alone for only seconds before 4 more ships came behind it. Then 4 more, and even more after those, until a swarm of brassy ships crowded space around the frigate. The crew rose to stare with hopeful anticipation at the oncoming ships. A dot of light appeared on the port side. A microgate spun itself into existence. A hand appeared on the edge of the microgate. A moment later, Nick Keller himself appeared, or a frazzled version of Nick Keller. His hair, once sandy brown and casually tidy, now was beaten to a crispy shag about his shoulders, blackened at the ends as if burned. His friendly face was leathery from exposure, his clothing a perfect nightmare. He wore his regular trousers and burgundy crew sweater, but they were gaudily patched with interwoven segments of chainmail. Keller stepped onto the bridge.
Tell Ryota to stop powering the gateway. There's nobody left on the other side. We'll need the grave ship system to move these freighters. There's no more power coming from the other side. Just let the damned hole close up for good.
He looked around and reveled in what he saw. The quarter-foil cut spark shield on the side deck, the cobalt obsidian dome overhead, the multitude of flickering data screens, the carpet, the rail. This bridge is beautiful. Now he turned his fatigued gaze to his crew. He hadn't seen them in more than a year. You're all beautiful. He found his way to the command chair and ran his hand along the studded forest green leather, which looked to him as if it actually glowed. The reddened skin on his cheeks and around his eyes crinkled into patterns as he smiled. The bridge winked and murmured its faint electrical song around him, so different from the disorderly crackle of the metal world.